You're listening to Creative Campfire, where creatives like you come to talk shop, share stories, and light the path for one another. Whether you're here to learn, grow, or feel a little less alone, welcome to the fire. Hey everyone, welcome back to the fire. I am so excited for you to meet one of my newest best friends. I met him at Adobe VIP Day out in San Francisco this past February, and he was just so kind and warm. We happened to walking over to the Adobe building, and I was like, hey, I'm Shelly. He's like, hey, I'm Michael. I was like, what do you do? Oh, you shoot for NatGeo. And I was like, oh my God, you're like my new best friend. I have to know everything. Because if you're a photographer, you've probably been obsessed with NatGeo from being a kid, going through the magazines. And now we get to talk to someone who actually has been in the magazine. He has been part of their adventure for a really long time. He has photographed my most favorite animals. Yes, cats, but more than that, penguins, which I totally obsessed with him about. Michael, I'm so excited to have you here to chat with everyone today.
I'm so excited to be here and grateful for you to have me. I'm excited to kind of dive in and explore all the different sides of the photo world with you.
It's going to be a very long journey. For those that don't know, you have been at this for some time. You have traveled thousands of miles, more than almost 200 countries. I'm just rounding up here. I know it's not quite 200, but I mean, it might as well be. And I want to know, how did this all come together? Where was this through line in the career when you were like, yes, travel, adventure, people, animals, this is what I want to focus on?
Yeah. I mean, I think the funniest, maybe ironic part about my story is I didn't even get on a plane until I was 18 to go to college because I grew up in Florida. My family didn't have a lot of money, so we weren't like traveling all over the place. But I noticed when I first started using a camera in high school that it was basically an excuse to go places. And I would drive to small towns outside of my home city. And I also noticed it was like a key to unlock doors to places. Like people would actually let you in with a camera when they otherwise wouldn't. One of my favorite stories that I actually don't talk much about, my first internship when I was in high school was I photographed surgeries in a Florida hospital.
What?
And so I was like scrubbing in at 5 a.m. with a camera before I would go to school to then like photograph like a brain stent being put into a stroke victim.
Whoa.
And I remember being like talking to people later in my life and being like, med students don't even get to see that. And you were like 16 going into a hospital. So
That's
it was
wild.
one of those things where I was like, oh, a camera just like opens the door to places that you wouldn't otherwise get access to. And then I think, I started small, driving 10 minutes away from my high school to go to the hospital. And then I really pushed it. And now I'm just like on a plane twice a month going to different places to photograph them. So I got really lucky that it sort of, went from 0 to 100. But yeah.
I think it's really, really wild to think back to those early days, right? Where
Yeah.
You're in a hospital, which you probably never thought you could be a photographer in a hospital doing surgeries, right? That's typically not what people pick up a camera to photograph.
No, not at all. Yeah. And it was also funny because there was a nurse assigned to me the first day I did it, and she was like sticking really awkwardly close to me, and I was like, what's happening? And then I finally asked her, I was like, what's your job? And she was like, oh, I'm here in case you faint. I was like, oh, she was like, oh yeah, we have people come in here that like think they can handle it, and then boom, they're on the floor. So I was like,
it's so
good
funny.
to know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you go from these early days, not getting on a plane, camera in hand,
Yeah.
shooting medical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
to photographing some of the most beautiful places in the world and doing some like amazing discoveries. So what's kind of like the next stepping stones? You leave Florida, and the next stepping stone is what?
Yeah, well, so I moved to New York City to go to school for photography, and I had these dreams of working for National Geographic, but I kind of had no idea where do you even begin to start shooting work that's out in the world. And I remember meeting with a photographer who told me, you will never get hired for something that you haven't already done. And he was like, you need to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's just like give yourself the assignment, basically. And I ended up doing a cross country bike trip between my junior and senior year of college, which ended up being my first travel story. So I basically was like, okay, well, no one's obviously going to give me an assignment. I'm in college, but let me just go do something radical, like biking 4,000 miles and document it and see what comes of it. It was also kind of a cheat code because it ended up being my senior thesis for college, which was great. And it was also funny because once I was done with the trip, I was like, well, I can't go back and shoot anymore. So this whole class is going to be me editing this trip. So it really felt
Well,
like
I mean, I guess like it really worked. It really worked in your advantage.
Yeah,
you could spend all that
100%.
time in school, like, massaging the story, figuring out the pagination. What are you going to say along the way? And how in the end did that turn out?
So it went over really well, but it was also kind of a learning curve because the way I ended up writing and shooting the story, it was very diaristic because I had been obsessed with photographers who were very like personal in their narratives. Like there was a photographer who had done this whole diary about returning home to the country that she hadn't been to since she moved away as a kid. But once I published it, I realized I didn't actually want my photography to be about me. And I thought maybe that's what I did want. And then once it was done, I was like, actually, I want to tell other people's stories, not my own. And so I, got lucky that someone basically approached me and was like, you seem to really enjoy going from point A to point B. Have you ever heard of this pilgrimage that people walk in Spain? And at the time I had not. And it's this 500-mile walk that people do. And I decided I was going to go there, but specifically focus on the people doing the walk and sort of take myself out of the narrative. And then that would be my next sort of experiment of trying to make a travel story.
So it's interesting because I think I hadn't really heard of the pilgrimage before until maybe a couple years ago. And then this particular year, I had 5 friends who actually did the pilgrimage. And I just was like, is this like the culmination when like, this is the year, like all these people I know doing this thing that I never heard about like 4 years ago are now all doing it. And I didn't realize, one, that there's multiple ways that people walk this pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And 2, that some of it is very, very treacherous and very, very desolate. And so I'm curious, what was the path that you took, and did your idea of following, some of the people doing the pilgrimage actually stick? Or did it end up being a little bit reflective about you?
Yeah, so that was an interesting evolution once I got there because I was still such a baby at the time. I mean, this is back in 2012 and I graduated college in 2011. So I was still kind of,
figuring it out,
shooting from the hip, figuring it out. Like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. And what I realized is I was still journaling really heavily once I got there. So I arrive in this small town on the border of France and Spain. I also had never left the country before, so that was another thing. Is it was I got my passport for this trip.
That's a very exciting moment in time.
Yeah, it was very exciting. And the route that I decided to do is what is kind of known as like the main route of the Camino de Santiago. It's sort of like the most popular one. It's the most well outfitted, and it goes from a town called, I'm terrible at French, but it's called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And it goes all the way to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. And it's about 500 miles. But when I arrived, I wanted to interview people, but I realized the photography aspect was all sort of being inspired by my journal. So, like, what I was photographing was the people, but the sort of like feeling of the pilgrimage, I realized, was coming from my diary. So, like, the diary was still a huge part of my process. And I would read the diary and be like, okay, I'm describing the pain of the pilgrimage. I'm describing the fog that I'm seeing in the morning. I'm describing the same meal that I'm eating every single day. How do I make visuals that bring people into that personal experience of walking a pilgrimage. So it was almost like the diary was still there, but it was coming through the perspective of the images that were filling all the holes that weren't just portraits of other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that it's almost like you were art directing yourself through your diary.
Yeah, 100%. Because I would really run out of ideas. I mean, in essence, photographing a pilgrimage on paper is extremely boring. It's people getting up and walking and then doing it again.
Doing it again.
And you're like, okay, well, how many blistered feet can I photograph before this just becomes monotonous? And so a lot of it was, wrenching the sponge of creativity to be like, how do we get a new perspective on this and really make sure I've shown the whole experience of what it's like to be on the pilgrimage?
So, I mean, 500 miles is a long time to be on a pilgrimage. At the end, and so I can't imagine how many images you ended up with at the end of the pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to your point of like having to dig deeper for that creative drive, what came out of the end where you were like, okay, I was going to my diary kind of for this inspiration to reflect, to put down your own notes, to pull out little pieces that might have been missing. But how did that inform what came out of it? Like what you learned in almost this masterclass, right? Like this was like your graduate degree from college, right? In a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I learned first and foremost was that, at least back then, I was a terrible editor. I mean, when I published this project, I was like, people are going to want to look at a 5-chapter, 150 image, 10,000 word project. And I'm still amazed that there are people that actually do go through the whole project. But I remember when it came time to it getting attention and people, wanting to potentially publish it, it was like, okay, you have to take these 150 photographs and choose 8. And you've got to take that, 14,000 words and choose 800. And so the lessons kept coming in the sense of, you have to be such a ruthless editor, even if you've spent years on a project, to eventually make it the best version of what it could be that like deeply captures the experience. And I think, it's nice to have both versions in existence. Like I kind of love that I still have the deep dive on my website, and it's probably the biggest project I've ever done or will ever do. But it's like, there will probably be no other project in my life that I can spend essentially 2 years on researching and expanding and shooting and just like getting every potential side of it possible. And so I still, even though it was like the first project I ever did, I think like, was that my magnum opus? Maybe.
Or maybe it's just informing what comes next. Right. And so if we look at kind of where your work has come now, which I still want to get back to how you got into NatGeo, but your work now is very climate focused.
Yeah.
You shoot a lot of climate stories, and I'm curious about, you were saying like how you've had to become like kind of this ruthless editor. You don't get to spend as much time, really developing a story, but you do get to go to some places and spend time. I don't want people thinking like you show up and you're like, oh, I'm here for 10 minutes and then I've got to go. You do have a little bit of breadth of time. And from what I can see on the outside of like social, I know social is not always the best storyteller. But, like you do show up in places and you have, usually like at least a day or two to explore somewhere and have a story. So I'm curious how that skill set over time, now we fast forward a dozen years. Mm-hmm. Have you become a better editor? Like, do you see your work different when you show up in these places to shoot, that you have a better lens? Or is it now almost rote? Like you're like, it's like riding a bicycle. I know what I'm looking for. I know how to edit it. Or is it still like very thought driven? And, do you still keep a diary and that kinds of things?
Yeah. I mean, I am the biggest proponent. I can't think of a job where I didn't either pay for it myself or just beg the client to let me add a day to show up early or stay a little later and like eat that cost, or just like have them not even pay me for that shoot day. But I can't hit the ground running. I just think it's such a bad way to approach travel photography, because it's so hard to get a perspective on a place without like taking just a minute to soak it up and like understand, how does the light work differently here? What are the day-to-day errands that people are doing here? What is the food like? Like, I think it's very presumptive to sort of like arrive and within 3 hours be like, I'm ready to take photos that are going to translate this place for an audience and make them feel like they're here, without having the time yourself to understand what it feels like to be there. Because I go back and forth on how much you can be present with a camera to your eye, but I really think I've learned over time that no matter what, it does remove you to a certain degree when you're just thinking image focused. Like, it's like turning on another part of your brain that sort of quiets another part of your brain, which is like the experiential part, because you're just throwing frames out and trying to find the images. And so in my ideal world, I land, I try to go out without the camera. I just bring my journal or my notes app, and I just observe and start making those notes of like, what is interesting here. And it's tricky with travel photography because there is a sort of obvious shot list and perspective that you have to get with most travel photography. It's just inevitable, you know, like maybe there's that hotel shot or a mix of candids, portraits, food, etc. But once I've checked those boxes, my goal I always say it's like the get weird day, where it's like, it's not just take photos that I haven't seen in this place, but also try to take photos that I personally haven't taken before. Because you know this, once you're like decades into a career, or decade, you're like, am I just taking the same photograph over and over and over? And so then you're just trying to push yourself to say, well, what's an image that I could take that someone wouldn't think is like a Michael George photo here? And that's been my big experiment over the past few years, is like, how do I push it to not just be that person who's just taking the same photograph?
I think that's really hard too, because
it's so hard.
You know, you have been in so many different scenarios and so many different places that a lot of times it probably does feel like, okay, I got the lobby shot, you know, and then you're like, okay, I got the CYA shot. Let's try to push for 5 more angles or 5 more things here just to see. And yeah, it is really hard. I mean, I shot a lot of wine prior to moving to London, and I would show up on those wine shoots and be like, okay, how many pictures of a vineyard can I shoot? Right? Like, how can you really make it feel any different than the last 3 vineyards that I just shot? Yeah. Right. You're like, there's only so many angles and so many vines and so many ways, you know, this one's head trained and this one's not. And these are single vine and that's an old vine. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, I got that. So I relate that way through like, how many pictures of a burger can I take?
And I mean, I got to start photographing weddings, and I shot weddings for probably 8 years or so. And I remember towards the end being like, I am trying so hard to take a new wedding photograph, and it sometimes feels impossible. But I ended up, you know, rather than saying I need to photograph this entire wedding in a new way, I would, you know, limit the scope of the goal and say, like, if I walk away from this with one image that feels fresh and new, then I accomplish my goal. And so it becomes less like, you know, let me somehow lobotomize myself and become a brand new photographer, and more like, what if I just take one new perspective, and then you feel okay, and you're not putting all this insane pressure on yourself.
And I think that's an interesting point, because there's a lot of times, you know, when people say like, oh, I show up for a shoot. So whether you're like a commercial photographer or a brand photographer or product photographer, you're like, okay, I'm showing up for that shoot. I've got to shoot the shot list. Like you said, you know, hey, there's like this kind of unwritten rule of shot lists for travel photographers. And it's like, okay, you got to show up and shoot that shot list. But then you're like, okay, I want to actually shoot for me now. You know, like, how do I expand that portfolio? So speaking of shot lists and brands, so how did NatGeo come eventually into your world?
Yeah, I mean, the funniest thing about how it happened is it still is just lightning in a bottle Cinderella story. So I created a Kickstarter for the Camino project because I went self-funded and then I got back. This is that expands the craziness of the story. So I actually walked the Camino twice. So it was 1,000
Oh my
miles, not just
gosh.
500. So I walked it and I came back and I was like, I don't think I got everything. And I want to go back, but I do not want to pay for it because it was expensive at the time. So I did a Kickstarter back in the days where those were such a huge thing. And I was lucky that it kind of got some traction in the photo world. Like at the time, this is so funny. Instagram had a blog, I think it was like a Tumblr, where they would feature people. And they featured my journey because also at the time they would it's hilarious in retrospect because it's such a privacy invasion, but they would put a map on your profile and like show where the photos were taken. And it was
Right before you could click like, yes, I'm okay with location. Or
yeah, you would just be like, oh, well, here's all the photos I took on Instagram and where they were taken. But it was cool because I was walking across the country, so you would see the line of images of the pilgrimage. So I was just sort of lucky that it was taking off in various corners of the internet, and I fully self-published it. And within 24 hours, I got an email from an editor at NatGeo saying, hey, we're looking for stories and we've been following this and we think we might want to put it in the magazine. And I 100% thought it was spam. I just didn't believe it. I was like, no, that's not real. Let's move on with our day. And I probably waited 2 days. I remember telling a friend about it. They were like, you should definitely respond to that. I think I looked up the person on LinkedIn and saw that they actually were an editor at NatGeo. And, so I responded and lo and behold, things got moving. And eventually, it ended up as a big feature in the magazine. And it was crazy to me because I was like, this is essentially the first big project I've done out of school. And now it's in this magazine that I always dreamed of being published in. And I remember reflecting on some journal because this was probably when I was 25 by the time it published, because it didn't actually publish until 2015. Like that goes to show how long their lead times are. But I remember like looking back at my journal, it was like, what do you do when you achieve your dreams at 25 and there's nothing left to do? And I was like, wow, first off, hubris, because there was plenty left to do. But second, I really was kind of in shock. I was like, oh my God, my whole life's career dream was to get published in this magazine, and now I did. Great.
And then you're like, now what?
Yeah. And luckily now, since then, there's been many now whats. So, we've really evolved on that thought process. But at the time, I was just kind of like, this is crazy. How did I already do this?
I do think when it comes so early, like my dream, I did straight out of college. Like I did it in my senior year of college. I wanted to work in pro sport, and I got a job with the Galaxy and the Lakers simultaneously. I worked. And so I was like, oh my God, now what? Like I'm living my dream. And so I can fully relate where you get that magazine and you're like, it's in print, it's in my hand. I've been dreaming of this since way back, when I was like an early preteen. And then you're like, okay, so now what?
Yeah.
And
I literally had a dream. I literally had a dreams come true party at a bar with like 40 of my friends where they all brought the magazine and I signed it, which in retrospect is kind of insane. But it was like at the time so cute because we're like, in our young 20s and we're like, no one knows, we're all wannabe artists, what's going to happen. So when something does happen, you celebrate it in like a big way. But yeah.
I wish you would do that for every article now. I mean, I think like we don't do that enough, honestly. Like we don't celebrate those, even like the small victories, we don't really celebrate enough. We're so kind of focused on the next thing that we kind of forget that we really worked hard for the thing that we just achieved. Yeah. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, like I did that thing. That's cool. Okay, so what's the next thing? I'm working on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I
Right.
love that you threw yourself this like victory party, right? Like I made it, I did the thing, I got to where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's
even though
also
it took a while.
wild, like what long legs that project has had too. I didn't even think about this connection until we were talking, but in 2 hours from now, I'm giving a lecture at Dartmouth for their pilgrimage class on the Camino in that project. So like I'm still doing professional work related to that project, which is crazy because there's not really
Yeah.
any other work that I've done that continues to bring me into academic and other places. But yeah, it's still thriving.
That is wild. And you even talked about the Camino project when we met at Adobe. It was part of your little presentation. We got to see your feet.
Yeah, my disgusting blistered foot. Yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting because you do all this climate work. I mean, not to shift gears, but
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that you do now is it's a very different type of emotional connection to the earth.
Yeah.
One is a very personal connection of why people go on the journey, but this one is really can be really hard. And when you mentioned like shooting the same thing over and over and over again and then trying to push for the next thing, I'm really curious, like you've now been to Antarctica numerous times
Yeah.
and like, how do you make that feel fresh and new? I mean, how much snow can you possibly photograph?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Antarctica and climate stories seem to actually just go hand in hand because when you're down in the poles or down or up in the poles, you realize what a front line they are for climate change. And so much of the repeated visits ends up being about the science that's happening down there and just how unbelievably quick things are changing. I mean, I've only been going down there for maybe 4 years now, and I have already seen dramatic changes in weather or the size of certain glaciers or the sort of ways that certain wildlife are acting. And I'm starting to realize so much of photography is like you're creating these time capsules. Like at the time, you sort of, I think, when you're like, let's say you go to a gallery and you see these like incredibly beautiful photos of old New York. But for that photographer who was taking that picture, that was just New York. You
Yeah.
know, that doesn't actually seem that interesting. And I've realized so much of photography is like you're unwittingly creating these time capsules of the planet. And they're only going to get more interesting the more distant you get from them. And that can be a city street or it can be, you know, a continent on the south part of the world. And so much of the climate work I'm doing now realizes it's like about the scientists and the experiments and the environment, and eventually maybe I'll be down there in 20 years and I'll take the same photograph, talking about taking the same photograph over again, but then you can compare it to the one I took 20 years ago, and that really creates the impact on the audience that's needed to show them what's changing.
Well, I do remember you had showed us, there was some pictures you had in your presentation of, there was like a science outpost that was incidentally like built, I think it was like in the 60s or 70s. And they didn't
Yeah.
realize that it was like on this little tiny island. And then as the snow started to melt and the glacier started to melt, it literally was not part of the continent. And then they had to like rebuild the science center.
Yeah.
And that was like, that's like a super stark contrast because your photos showed this very dilapidated kind of science lab slash building and then like the new building, and everyone's like, why is there two of them? You know, and to your
Yeah.
point of like distance of time and space and place and what is happening really opens up a lot of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, in that same image, there's also, I may not have talked about this, but there's also dog cages, which is such a remnant of the past because we don't allow any wildlife on Antarctica now that isn't from there. So, like, we used to have dogs that would sled us across Antarctica, and that's illegal now. So, that image sort of holds so much history in it, like tying both to the past and what the climate is currently doing down there. So, it's one of those images that sort of needs the explaining, but then the words and the imagery like really tie together to make such a interesting narrative that you may not get if you're just looking at it.
This goes back to your writing and your photography. I mean, what you learned on the Camino, right? Which is that your words have to bridge the gap between what's happening with your subjects and your images. And so I think like I'm starting to see a through line in your work where you're like, I'm capturing these things, but then there's this nod to the past, and then people that don't know the history of the past need a little bit more context, and that's where like that writing piece comes in. When we talk about climate, can feel really heavy and dark. And I'm just curious about, how do you stay grounded, like when you're dealing with such a heavy topic?
I think the thing that keeps me optimistic, well, it's interesting because in some ways I will conflate optimism with nihilism, which maybe is not the most healthy thing. But I think it's, especially when you are in a place like Antarctica, like I'm working on such large time scales in my mind. Like, I think, when you're in Antarctica and you think of, there are areas that used to be a tropical rainforest, or, I was just in Egypt where I'm in the desert and you find marine fossils because that used to be an ocean. And I've done enough work around the world to see evidence of how often the planet changes that I'm less precious about the way we're changing the planet, and that I think like everything we are doing is terrible in many ways, and I think everyone should be doing what they can to stop it. I also think if it is inevitable that we ruin the planet will heal itself and then become whatever new iteration of what it has been, because it's healed itself and fixed itself a million times over. And so whether that's like resigning yourself to the fact that humans are, gonna keep being extractive and destructive, and there's gonna be people who are fighting against it, and there's gonna be, corporations that are fighting against them, and it's just gonna be this like battle to the end of time. It's not that I'm like resigned to the inevitability of it, but it's more that I'm like, the earth will be okay. We may not be okay. We may, eradicate some species along the way, but like the earth and life is going to figure it out. And so I'm not like sort of so desperate about the damage we're going to do to the planet that I think like life is going to disappear. I just think it's going to change and it's going to evolve and it's going to become something new. And that's what it's always done. So that's kind of ended up being what my perspective is on it.
I think that's really interesting. I think we saw a lot of that. I mean, if we take a microcosm of COVID, right, where everyone's on lockdown and the planet did start to heal itself in various ways.
So fast.
So fast, right? Within a few months of people being in lockdown and people not driving and people not traveling as much as they do. And also just, habits changed. People were basically locked inside for a good portion of it. And we saw nature really come, to be like cliche, but nature came to life, right? Like we saw, different things happening, skies changing, atmospheres changing, landscapes changing. So I do think like from what you're describing, I'm like, I can see it. Like I can put it in my own context of like, just like looking back just a few years ago to say like, wow, yeah, look at what happened in such a short period of time. Or even when you watch what's like those TV shows like on History Channel or Discovery where it's like the abandoned buildings and then they show it and it's like, this is what it looked like in 30 and it's this big industrial building and now they're showing it and it's like all dilapidated, like the vines have taken all over, the earth is like reclaiming it. Yeah. So I do think that there is like it's an interesting perspective I hadn't really put together until you said that.
Yeah, like I did a project on an island in the Caribbean, it's also a country, Curacao, but it's not very big. And the project was basically on this area of the island that it was this like wealthy person's estate. And when they died, they were like, I want this to be fully rewilded back to what it was naturally. So they brought in a bunch of scientists, biologists, horticulturalists, all these sorts of things. And they repropagated the land to just, this land was huge. It made up like 10% of the entire island. Oh. But wow. They fully repropagated it, and what they realized is like all they needed to do was preserve that small part of the island, and all the wildlife that sort of repropagated in that area spread throughout the entire island, and basically like bolstered the species populations of different birds and lizards and other animals throughout the entire island, but all they had to do was conserve this small part of it. And it was a really interesting use case to show, like, if you're a conservationist, you don't need to tell people, like, it's not that you can't build anything anywhere. It's that you just need to conserve small areas so that wildlife can continue to thrive and propagate somewhere. And that goes for marine reserves, land reserves, all that sort of thing. So I love working on these stories that give people the specific use case or example of it doesn't have to be the extreme that you're thinking, you know?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be 100%. Like you said,
Yeah.
it was like 10%.
Yeah.
Or even less than 10% if it was only part of the estate.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of small and preserving, can we geek out about penguins for a minute?
Oh my God. The greatest. It's really funny. I mean, I've been down to Antarctica 7 or 8 times, which I know is an insane sentence. But the penguins, like, they never get old. Like, you watch them for hours and they're just always funny. They're always sassy. They're always fighting with each other. They're always being cute. They're always curious. Like, they're just one of the best species on the planet, I think.
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm a big penguin lover.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you mentioned to me that I thought was really fascinating, as much as I love penguins, it was something that I kind of knew but didn't really know until you were like, did you know there's penguins that only live on like this island? And they don't hop around, you know, like I mean, like I knew like the emperor penguins, they're like on the main section and they don't really live anywhere else. And I knew that, you know, there's like gentoos and chin straps and a whole bunch of them. Mm-hmm. But I didn't realize that there are some that only live like on one island.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes to show what an insane place New Zealand and Australia are, because there are so many species that just developed on an island and they're so far away from everything that they're endemic to that island and that's it. Like, we're not just talking like animal species, but also plant species that literally only exist on that tiny island. And there's an island called Macquarie that has a little penguin called the royal penguin, and he's adorable, but you can only find him there, and basically no ships go there because it's in the middle of the Southern Ocean. It's so far from everything. But I was very, very lucky, I'm knocking on wood again, to get to visit that island and see this penguin that just, it only exists there. And it's, you know, thriving now that they've sort of eradicated all the invasive species off the island, and it's sort of back to what it always was. And it's just, you know, doing its thing.
It's amazing. I mean, I think that's, again, going back to like conservation, where you just said like they eradicated the invasive species. So now you see the penguin thriving. And I have to say, like, I'm super jealous that you've gotten to see all these penguins in the wild. I mean, I see them in photographs and a few of them in zoos, but is there any species that you have met, whether penguin or otherwise, that you were just kind of blown away? Like, you have maybe seen it or have heard about it, but you were like, wow, seeing it in the wild was unreal.
I think the top winner would have to be elephants. Like, I first saw them when I went to Sri Lanka, and I remember just it's like they're so hard to describe because they are such weird animals. Like, the craziest part is they're silent. Like, if you are not looking in their direction, they can literally come upon you and you don't hear them. Which you're like,
really?
It's a
That's
giant animal. How do you not hear it? But they're able to move without any sound at points, that's like the number one fact that I thought was the craziest. But just how intelligent, social, another favorite fact is they'll create their own gardens where they'll bend a tree over that's like spiky, and then they'll bend it over a bunch of grass so that no animals can get to it. And then they'll leave it there for a little bit and the grass will grow, and then they'll bend the tree up, and then they'll eat all this like fresh grass that they had protected. So they basically like they're smart enough to know that I can create and grow my own little garden. So there's
That's
just,
wild.
yeah, there's so many ways that they're fascinating animals. So I think they really might win just because they're strange, cute, intelligent, weird, all the things. So
I had no idea they were silent. I mean, that
yeah,
just
I mean,
blows my
not
mind.
always, obviously, but
Yeah,
like if they
but
wanna be, it's
they could be
crazy how
stealth.
they can be
Yeah.
so quiet. Yeah, 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 total stealth.
It's like stealth element. I can see the new
Yeah.
cartoon.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Um, so your work is not just editorial though, right? So you also have worked with brands like Apple, Airbnb and stuff. Do you find that there's like talk about the differences between like how the briefs are so different?
Mm.
And because I would just I don't know, my naivete would tell me that, if a big brand is coming to you, they have a brand deck, they've thought about the creative, they have given you a shot list they want you to hit. Whereas an editorial might be a little bit more open to like your creative suggestions.
Yeah. I mean, the real question is how many times am I going to knock on wood during this interview? Because I'm going to do it again
We
right
could
now.
turn this into a little bit of a tea drinking game. Like, I think that's
No,
four.
no, literally, I'm just going to be like, "No, no." I feel really lucky that most brands that have approached me in the past little while sort of see what I already do, and then they come to me with projects that are very in line with the sort of travel, interest, people focused wildlife world that I'm already working in. And then I get to just do something that is definitely more controlled and polished and uh, directed than what I would normally do, but doesn't feel like completely out of left field for what I do. Like a great example is this was a few years ago, but I did a project for Airbnb where they were opening up a palace in Jaipur, India, to for people to stay in. It was at the time where they were sort of giving you access to like places that you might want to stay in, like the Downton Abbey, or all these things that like crazy
Right.
exclusivity. Um, but they wanted me to go and photograph like daily life in the palace, and then also I had to do the like formal portrait of the host and portrait interiors of the palace itself and the rooms you're going to stay in. But they also wanted the sort of Michael George approach of what is life like around this palace in the city of Jaipur, and just let me do my thing. So it's this really interesting mix where I'd say it's like 30% editorial freedom and then 70% like creative director over your shoulder telling you the exact shot they need that fits the graphic for when people are booking the place on the website. So I'm lucky that it's not completely, different from what I do in the day to day. I do work that is sort of in a studio, just your standard commercial portraiture, like every sort of photographer does to survive. But I am also really lucky that I get a lot of commercial projects that don't feel completely out of my soul.
Right. Are you the one looking for these projects, or are they finding you? Or is it a combination of both?
It's definitely a combination of both. I mean, I usually spend like 2 months per year in my drum up the work kind of phase. Like when I was on the West Coast in February, I extended my time to meet with all these clients, meet with new clients, show them all the work I've been doing, and pitch yourself. And then I'm lucky now that enough editors know what I do that I'll at least come to mind if something is sort of in line with what might fit what I've been working on. But it's also, this, it's also tricky because you get pigeonholed. And I love traveling. I also love my bed and being home. And my new thing is when I'm meeting with clients, reminding them that I can do what I do in the far corners of the planet in New York City. And I only in the past, I would say, year or two, have finally started getting work again that I don't have to get on a plane for. And I'm trying to push for that a little more just because I think it pushes me creatively to be like, well, how do you shoot your own city or like work in a studio? But also, I'm getting tired and I don't want to be on the road all the time. So I myself am trying to figure out like what is the new Michael balance of work that I want and what I sort of want to pitch to get. So, constantly.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a walk across New York.
Yeah. Oh my God, I would love
for
yeah.
Michael, right? Or like an Appalachian Trail type of idea, but maybe you go from the Catskills, or the, you go from like upper northern New York, like Buffalo to Manhattan.
Oh my God, I would love that. Honestly, yeah, I'm pitching
to
that
show
right
people
now.
like I could do this in my own state. I don't have to leave the state.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of been the new trick.
I think it's an interesting conundrum, right? It's like you love travel, you are so known for getting on a plane and going places and seeing some of these amazing places. And on your recent trip to Egypt, and speaking of your own bed, and you touched about this and like when we first started chatting about, before we hit record. For those that don't know, you were just in Egypt and you were doing some really amazing stuff, and you got to go to the Mountain of the Dead, which I'd never heard of, and of course then had to go research. But when you took your 10-hour journey after being in Cairo and being in like super duper metropolitan area, and then you went sand sledding, which we will totally touch on because we're going to get on that in a second. But you got really ill.
Yeah, so I had been warned by many people that about quote unquote Pharaoh's revenge, which I'm just like, I love that we have like the revenge for like all the different places that people travel. Like we've got
like
names.
when you go to Mexico.
We've got like cute names for people being absolutely devastated like by their GI system. But yeah, I had been in Egypt for 2.5 weeks, and I almost texted my friend Robin. I was like, I didn't get Pharaoh's. I've been fine. Everything's been great. Like the food has been delicious. It's whatever. And then I was flying from Aswan to Cairo, and I was desperate for food, and I ate this food in the airport that I knew when I saw it. I was like, I probably shouldn't eat that, but it's been fine, and I'll be fine. And then I landed and I drove 10 hours to the Siwa Oasis, which is, literally in the absolute middle of nowhere. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, things are terrible and I don't know what's happening. And then fast forward 8 hours later, and I had told the guy who runs the hotel, because he saw me and he was like, you don't look normal.
Good.
And I was like, I don't feel normal. And then, not to be very dramatic, but I passed out in the hotel lobby because he was trying to get me to go to the pharmacy, and we went to the pharmacy and I got back. And I literally basically go to stand up and I'm like, oh, legs are buckling. And I wake up and he's like trying to hold my head up and like give me juice. And I was like, I can't hold down juice. And eventually he was like, hospital. And I was like, yes. Is there a hospital? I was like, and luckily I learned like, it doesn't look like a big town, but it is a town of 40,000 people, even though it's an oasis. Okay. And there was a hospital, and I went and I got everything I needed. I will say, the doctor put in an IV better than I have ever gotten one in my entire life. So I was like, the room may look like a desert sand room with a wooden window, but like we're getting some really good medical care. But yeah, it only took me, luckily, like 2 days to recover, and I was pumped full of God knows how many antibiotics and antiparasitals and all those things, and I spent 2 days in bed, but I recovered and I'm alive, so I feel much better now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I saw your story. I was kind of freaking out for you over here of like, oh my God, I hope he's okay. I hope they treated him well. And then you like posted your things of like sledding on the sand.
Yeah, no, literally I had so many people messaging me on Instagram being like, I'm not your mom, but I'm going to be your mom and I'm going to yell at you because what are you doing? Why are you not in bed? And they were correct. I mean, I should have been probably resting for that entire week because the sight of food was still like, could not take it, like level of nausea. But I was also like, I can walk and I am only here for another 4 days and it's been my dream to come here. So I'm going to do things I probably shouldn't do, and it's fine. It's fine. It was fine. I made it.
It was fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I saw that you were sledding in the sand, I was like, oh, he's feeling better. That was my thought, was like, he's feeling better, but I hope he's feeling better enough, because when you go down, you have to walk back up.
Yeah, that was where I made the mistake, I would say. So the Siwa Oasis is like right on the border of the desert, like the full on, like, what do they call it? They call it something really funny. It's like the Sea of Sand, or like the Great Sand Sea, because it literally is just like ocean waves, but it's just sand. I've never seen that before in my whole life. And it's like you basically drive towards the border of Libya, and you are in a 4x4, and they call it a, 4x4 safari, and you're just driving sand dunes as if they're a roller coaster. And then when that's done, they set up tea and they give you a board and they're like, go surf the sand. And I was like, I've never done this before, but I am stoked to do it.
Yeah, I'm not saying no.
No, I'm not saying no. I will say, okay, two things. One, it is, I would say, 4 times faster than I thought it would be. Like, I go sledding, I've done other things, and I consider myself, like, I'm adventurous. I was halfway down that sand dune, and I was like, death is imminent. Like, I am going so fast. And then luckily, once your brain catches up with the, like, 80 miles an hour, it feels like you're going, you finally hit the bottom, and you're, like, slowing down. But it's fast. And then you get to the bottom, and you look at how far away everyone is, and you've just gotta walk,
hike,
and it is just, oh my god. And it gets worse the closer you get to the top, because then the sand just starts like falling in on itself. So I really wanted to do it like 4 or 5 times, but I think I only did it 2 or 3 times, because I was like, I literally don't think I can walk up this sand dune again.
Yeah, it's very tough to walk in deep sand.
Yeah. And I was with a bunch of other people who were perfectly healthy, and so I was very proud of myself for even making it back up a few times. But.
Well, I think it looked very fun. It reminded me, so for those that live in the U.S. and can't get over to the Sea of Sand, mountains, you can go to the Great Sand Dunes of Colorado, and you can surf the sand dunes in Colorado, and they're white versus red. So if you want to go do white sand, Michael, you should go to the Great Sand Dunes.
I literally did not know this existed, so I'm very excited to know.
And then closer to you, even closer, is the Great Mount Baldy of Indiana on Lake Michigan. It has the Great Sand Dunes at Mount Baldy. I think it's a state park and not a national park, but it might be a national monument. I might stand corrected. Okay. I think it's a national monument. But there's big old sand dunes right there at the south end of Lake Michigan, on the border of Chicagoland area. And it's between Michigan City and Hobart or Gary, Indiana. There's these big, great sand dunes there too.
Oh my God. I would love the idea of just doing like a sand dune tour of the world.
And then you could go down to Mexico. You can go to Baja. There's sand dunes in Baja.
Yeah.
And
they're
there's
in northern New Zealand. I know that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean, this is something you could go exploring, and you could be like, I have surfed and sledded all of the sand dunes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a really fun bucket list. Much better than my current bucket list, which is find the best burger in New York. So
I have that bucket list here, so we could exchange notes.
Oh, good. Okay. I have my current number 1 is a restaurant that closed, and I'm really still depressed about it. So I've got to find a new number 1. Yeah.
That is really depressing. You find the good burger place, and then you're like, I'm going to go back. Yeah. Nope, I'm not going back. You just got to find the chef. Where did the chef end up? Because maybe they're still making that burger, but elsewhere.
It's a good point. And also I think nostalgia in the retrospect of the fact that it's closed makes it even better in my mind. So maybe it'll be number 1 forever.
There you go. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we at here? I mean, we've talked about so many things. We talked about the sledding in the desert. We talked about your health stuff. We have not talked, though. We were talking about animals, and we're going to touch back on animals because I believe you were in Morocco. Was it Morocco?
Yeah.
And you were wandering around at night, because I remember headlamps on in the photos. And you met some of these like night creatures who are out wandering around with big tails and, they like to purr. I'm so curious about all of the street cats that you have met along your adventures, because we both are big cat fans, and we were talking about cats at the top of our talk before we hit record. Yes, there was lots of things we talked about before we hit record. Listener, I'm so sorry that you weren't there for it, but it was really good. And now you get to hear some of the stuff we're going to talk about. So I know, like you mentioned being in India, you've been in Morocco, you've probably been to Greece and Turkey, where it's all, cats all the time. They're all over Italy. I am so curious about the culture of street cats. And like, have you found that cats in different places are, one, maybe like looked at differently? I mean, especially like in a place like Egypt that kind of like worships cats versus like other places that they're more like a pest.
Yeah, so I will say, and I don't know if this is verifiable, but I do think the street cats in Morocco were the best street cats I've ever found on the planet. Like, I ended up basically doing a little side photo project and like texting a group of friends daily cat updates, because they were all not only were they all seemingly well taken care of, they're extremely clean and also nice. Like, the nice was the one that like blew me away, because street cats in many places, they might put up with you, but they might attack you. It's always like you're really playing roulette if you decide to approach a cat that's not like collared or on the street or like in someone's home. But I swear every single cat in Morocco just like wanted to be pet. They seemed like, because of especially the ones in the desert, like covered in the dust and everything, I was like, they don't really seem to have any like fleas or other things. They just seem like fine and normal kitties. I'm sure some vet will comment and be like, absolutely not, they're covered in disease. But they seemed fine. And I just was like, everywhere I went, I was like, I have a new friend every hour, and they just want to follow you and play with you and like jump at your hand and just be sweet. And it was like living a dream. Like, it was truly incredible. I don't think I'd ever had a street cat experience that was that amazing. So,
yeah. I enjoyed watching it. I just will say, if you decide to do, there's the shop cats of New York. If you decide to do your own version of that someday, I'm there for it. I will sign up for that Kickstarter. Because I just find it really interesting. I remember being it was Rome, and we stumbled upon ruins. I mean, go figure, Rome and ruins. And there was this whole colony of cats in this. It was kind of like a sunken down, like 2 stories down, ruins. They were going to build an apartment building. They found whatever columns and whatnot. There was a whole sign there. But anyway, there was a colony of cats. And it's all roped off. Like, you're not supposed to go down there. And so my husband and I stood there. We were like, what is going on with these cats? And then all of a sudden we saw this woman come out of like the darkness, basically, like from underneath like the cement. And here she's like popping open all these cans, and all the cats are running at her, and they're all feeding. And we stood and in our best, like, half English, half Italian, try to have this conversation with her. Thank God for Google Translate. But yeah, she was like, oh yeah, there's like 30 cats here, and, we take care of them, and we make sure that they're, okay, and all this stuff. And we're like, wow, like, that's pretty amazing, because you would go to other places and it's just like the cats are like, fending for themselves and tearing out things from garbage cans and not so looked after.
Right.
So to your point of, you just don't know what type of feral cat you're going to find.
No, you don't. And it's also amazing in certain places where the people themselves don't have much, but they're still giving to the animals that are around them, which I think is such a generous way of living that you don't see in a lot of places. And also, speaking of that woman that you ran into, there are so many times where I like dream of being that woman. I'm like, one day I'm gonna be retired and I'm just gonna adopt a bunch of animals somewhere, and I'm just gonna it's gonna be my morning routine, going around and feeding all the animals, and that's just gonna be my life. So
That's
hopefully one
retirement
day,
life.
hopefully all my retirement funds are just gonna go to like fancy feast for the stray kitties.
Yeah. Well, just so I don't know if you've ever looked into this, but you can do, there's like sponsored trips to certain islands, especially in the Greek islands, where you can go and stay on a cat reserve. and you help take care of the cats for whatever, anywhere. I think the minimum is a week. You can go for a minimum of a week, and then they put you up for housing, they feed you, and then you help take care of the colony of cats and things like that during your stay. So if you're ever looking for a place to like get away to that has like free lodging, you can look into something like that.
That sounds like a literal dream. So, yeah.
I will send you the links.
Yep, I'll be looking that up right after.
So as we've talked about, like you span all kinds of different things, from portraiture, like traditional portraiture, to travel, to adventure, to animals. But like how does business work as a travel photographer? I mean, I think in this day and age, people, from what I've heard and other travel people I know, they like try to triple stack a job into like one trip, where they'll be like, oh, I have these 3 different brands I'm shooting for because brand A, B doesn't have a lot of money. C is kind of covering this. Then I get a sponsor for that. And maybe I do some stuff for myself. So what does that pie really look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is truly a game of like maximizing how are you gonna make the most out of every trip. Like, I'll give you 2, maybe 3 examples. So when I go to Antarctica, I'm usually going with NatGeo expeditions. And so I'm sort of going as like the photographer who's going to document like what the scientists are doing. I'm also giving lectures while I'm down there. I'm taking pictures. Like, it's sort of a multi-tiered job. But most of the images that I shoot there are mine. And so then I'll pitch Antarctica stories to different travel magazines. And then both times I've been to Antarctica over the past 2 years, I've gotten them picked up by travel magazines. So it's like I was paid to go, but then I also did a licensing deal, and then the Atlantic very recently like also licensed 2 of my glacier images for different stories. So it's like, if you look at each trip, it ended up having many different legs based on like all the images I shot. And then Egypt was actually meant to be a completely personal trip, but then I was meeting with a brand who sort of wanted to get a bunch of like cataloged images from around the world, and I basically just let them know all the places I was going, and they were like, oh, maybe we'll just do like a project fee and have you shoot some stuff for us while you're there. And then that ended up being like paying for a bulk of the trip. And so it feels, I kind of like joke and don't joke that like being a photographer is just being a con man. You're like constantly just like, how do I like find this thing that I want to do, and then like convince someone that I should get paid to do it. And you really feel like insipid at some point. You're just like, you're like scrambling and being creative and pitching decks and this or that, and somehow you look back at the end of the year and you're like, oh, it like worked out. I don't really know how it worked out, but like it worked out, and I got paid, and I went the places I wanted to go, and it's good. But nowadays, I'd say if we were looking at like a pie chart, like 30% is editorial, 60% is like or I'd say maybe 50% is like advertorial, where you're like working with a tourism board who's like working with a magazine or a brand. And then you've got that small chunk of like big commercial projects that like you're bidding for, and they're huge, and they're for a big brand like, you know, Expedia or Booking.com or something. And then a very, very small chunk is like just random licensing that happens. Like call out, or someone knows that you went somewhere and you get to go that way. But if I were to like truly pie chart it out, I think that's kind of the breakdown of my work in the past few years.
You mentioned lecturing in there and being like a teacher, you know, like you have a talk coming up, and then you do the expedition stuff with NatGeo. How much of that do you do, like really over like a course of whatever, a quarter or a year, however you want to think about it? I'm curious about kind of like the teaching aspect. I know there's a lot of photographers who then get into teaching and they kind of just do it for fun, but I'm wondering like, is it something you actively seek out? And one, you know, the NatGeo stuff is kind of like an all-in-one. You're doing photos and a bunch of other stuff, so it's not like you're just being paid to be a lecturer. But how much of that is like for fun, to get your name out there, to give back, versus like actually be a paid lecturer?
So I started out doing it kind of just for fun, and then especially once I started doing the NatGeo expeditions, I realized I was really good at it, and it was one of those things that I just didn't quite realize was part of in my wheelhouse. But now it's something that I actively pursue and I pitch myself as. And it's also one of those things where I'm finally at the age where I feel confident in giving those talks and teaching, because I would say, especially when I was in my late 20s, there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes with that, where you're like, well, I mean, I can talk about this, but like, am I someone who does this? And then suddenly, you know, now I'm 37 and I'm like, oh, I've been doing this for 15 years. Like, I know what I'm doing. I'm confident. I have experience. I would listen to me, like that kind of thing, where and I did not have that confidence before. And so now it's something that I actively pursue, and I'm pitching myself as someone who's like a, you know, educational workshop, narrative workshop, travel workshop, all that sort of thing. There's all these different topics that I can cover. And I also have realized how much I love teaching. Like, I really love being in a room with people and getting their ideas and critiquing their work and helping people improve their photography. It really gives me like a joy that I don't think I realized was there until I started doing it. And I was like, oh, like, especially with the NatGeo expeditions, like, you're mostly working with hobbyists and they have such a like passion for it that I would say most people I know who are working photographers do not have anymore. And it is, I feel like a witch from Hocus Pocus who's like sucking up the youth. And it's like, they're older than me, so I'm not actually sucking up the youth, but it's like soaking up the like youthful energy of someone who's like new to photography and just loves it with this like unabashed purity that is so infectious and fun. And like, they don't care if it's like being published somewhere or like getting likes on Instagram. Like, they just are excited. They took an in focus photo of a bird. They're like, oh my God, this flying bird is in focus. And that is, I'm an Olympian photographer. Like, they're like, I did everything I possibly could. And that sort of like excitement is so needed, I think, when you're in a career where you can get kind of bogged down by the day to day. And so I love being around people and teaching them just for that reason. Because I'm like, oh, their excitement makes me excited about photography. So
yeah, and you're like, oh, I have so much more to teach you now.
yeah, you're like, oh, if you like that in focus photo of a bird, you're gonna love
this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I do think that we all, once you're in it for a while and you've kind of hit a few like burnout points along the way, like being around people who are just genuinely excited to have a camera in hand, be out like shooting something, can really fill that, you know, well for you back up and get you excited for why you're there in the first place. I really, I love teaching. It's why I love mentoring too, is like helping people hit those success points that they've set for themselves. And you're like, you did it, you got there. And you're like, and I helped just a little bit. Like, I helped push you along, you know, and keep the blinders on so you don't have imposter syndrome or whatever it is. And I get that infectious like feeling too. I'm totally there with you. I find it really, really fascinating. And I find that the way that like it's broken up for you, especially the advertorial, is super interesting, because I don't think that's something that a lot of people think about. You know, like especially like tourism boards do have funds. They do pay people to go and photograph to make it like beautiful, like come to sunny San Diego. And now that I live in London, I can't tell you how many ads I see for different places in the United States. And I'm always like, who shot that? Right? Who's shooting that Virginia ad or that Texas ad or that Maine ad? And I think because you know, I come from California, you're in New York, that we don't necessarily see those tourism ads as much as when you're abroad and you're like, oh my God, right? Like the US these cities and states are really paying for people to try to get them to come here.
Yeah, like it's a destination. Like, I grew up in Florida, and at the time I'm like, get me out of here. And now I'm like, I would love to go visit the coastal beaches right now. Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting place to note. So if you're a travel photographer or you're like a hospitality photographer, it might be something to like look into. And the other thing that I have this workshop coming up, I'm going to be doing it all on licensing. I'm explaining licensing. I'm talking about licensing. And you mentioned licensing of your photos. Yeah. So when we let's just take like your Antarctic trip, for instance, and you were saying like, you go down there, you're there maybe for NatGeo. Do you tell your editor, or do you tell the editors that you've built relationships with at the Atlantic or Smithsonian or wherever it might be, like, hey, I'm taking this 2-week trip to Antarctica. I'm going to be down there focused on this. If you need anything, let me know. Or are you telling them after the fact?
I'd say it's a mix of both. So usually in that sort of meeting period that I do twice a year, I'll ask the editors directly, like, is it helpful for you to know where I'm going to be? And if the answer is yes, I have like a notes app list of the people who want to know where I'm going to be. And like every 4 to 5 months, I'll send them just a list of like, I'm going to be in this place, this place, this place. Do you need anything? Let me know. And otherwise, I do find the Instagram is still extremely valuable for people just like remembering you've been somewhere. Like, I mean, the Atlantic one is a great example where like they were doing a story on the Arctic and one of the editors had been following me. It was like, Michael's the only photographer I know who's been to the Arctic, period. And I know he was just there. So he'll have photos from like
something
sea
recent.
ice, of sea ice up there, something recent. So that was like an Instagram connection, but it really is kind of like a mix of all the things. I used to keep a running list of where I was going to be on the about page on my website. I did that for like 6 or 7 years, but then as people started visiting websites less, I stopped keeping up with that. But there was a period where that was like really helpful, where people would just go to my about page and be like, oh, he's going to be here, here, here. So
yeah. I think the one that's super fascinating to know, because I've heard like, oh yeah, Shelly, if you're going to be in London, like you should tell people that you're in London. And I'm like, yeah. Well, I live here half the year now, so it doesn't really feel like I'm visiting anymore.
Yeah.
But two, that whole idea of your images have legs, right? That your images can, that you own the images, you license them to NatGeo, you're licensing them for, editorial, or even it can become a fine art print, or it can live in a book. And I think that's something that I don't know if a lot of photographers really understand. Like, if you go back to your younger self, like even in college, like, was that something that you knew or were taught, or is that something you've learned over time?
I think I was vaguely taught it in school, but I never really understood how many ways it might exist in terms of licensing. Like, oh, there's licensing for editorial, but then there's also licensing for advertising, and then people will be publishing books, and then they might need it for a lecture or this or that. And it's just the wide ranges and places that images can live. I just truly did not know. I mean, another great example, not to, go back to the Camino 1 million times, but this year, DK published a huge book on the Camino, and they emailed me last year and ended up licensing like 20 of my photos for that book. And it wasn't like a huge check, but it was maybe like, it all in the day added up to like $850, but that's not nothing. That's like a 2-day rate editorial day, and it's like money that I just wouldn't have had. And so it came out of nowhere, and I didn't have to do anything other than send them the files. Which that's like right. The biggest blessing of licensing. It's like you just email a file. It's like the smallest lift. So like, yeah, you're not, making your living off of it, but if in total every year you're making $3,000 or $4,000, that like pays for my insurance and my accountant and like, maybe 1 or 2 months of health insurance.
Maybe a cup of coffee.
And maybe a cup of coffee left over. So it's like significant enough that it's like it can be a big like little boost every year.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know. I think that's a point worth like driving home when we're in this era of AI and people are very, concerned about generative. And two, when people are finding like Wall Street Journal, I haven't even talked about the new contract at Wall Street Journal, but the new contract at Wall Street Journal is a full buyout, right? They want you to sign away all of your stuff. There's a WhatsApp group. For those that want to know more, you can go to aphotoeditor.com, and he's paired up with the Visual Collective to talk all about, how people are handling it, what people are seeing who shoot for Wall Street Journal. But I think it goes to show why it's so important to kind of hold on to your copyright and hold on to that licensing and not have a buyout. Because just like you said, like in your Camino deal, you shot those images for a personal project. They went on to be used for other pieces and editorials. And now they're in a book. Like all these years later, like those, like you said, those photos are still driving work for you. You have a lecture coming. You have the DK book that just came out. I mean, it's just kind of phenomenal, the history that can go with the images.
Yeah. And I think when you're a young photographer, you know, just see the fee and you're like, oh, it's fine. They're paying me enough to like own these images. And you just can't see how many places those images might live for the entire rest of your life, which is why these fights are so unbelievably important.
I'm purposely staying quiet. It's like a mic drop moment.
Yeah.
So for photographers that are, you know, interested in this kind of more challenging environments and getting out to these places that are like harder to get to, like you mentioned that island in the, you know, off of New Zealand that like there's really no boats that go there. What is some of your advice that you would give those folks that like, you know, they're interested in doing this work, but it's a little bit challenging and physically challenging too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is start when you're young. No, I think, I mean, so much of it is just like recycling the advice that was given to me that worked so well, which is like save the personal money however you can and like get somewhere on your own and like see what your perspective on travel work is. I think it's the advice that I've given has really changed over time because I used to have to really drive home to people that they need to not shoot for Instagram. Like the, you know, early days of Instagram, there was like an Instagram style of travel photography that just blew up and then everyone was basically shooting the same aesthetic. And if you shot in that aesthetic, it would do viral. Luckily, that's not the case anymore. If you shoot that way, it doesn't go anywhere because everyone has seen a million images that look that way. So I think in a way, creativity is back. Like you have to be unique and interesting and have a perspective in your work. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere on social media or otherwise. But so much of being successful in the travel space is showing how you are going to shoot something that no one else can shoot in the way that you can. So it's like putting yourself in the places that are far away and showing that you can handle that first, because like not many people can. But then also once you're there, can you shoot in a way that it hasn't been shot before? And I think that it's funny and most challenging to actually start with places that have been over photographed. Like a great challenge is like go to Paris and make a unique photo of the Eiffel Tower. You know,
yeah, that's hard.
Like, that's really hard to do. But like those little challenges I think are really important when you're starting out as a, you know, travel photographer, because these places are going to have had literally billions of photographs taken of them. So what are you bringing to the table that someone else isn't?
I think that's a good challenge. I mean, I should set myself that challenge just for Big Ben. Like go and see if I could shoot Big Ben in a way that I haven't even, like maybe it's just how I haven't shot it. I've shot it dozens of times already living here, but you know, I take my friends down there when they come to visit and they all kind of shoot a very similar shot. And now I'm like, oh, if I was to really push myself, what would make it different? How could I shoot it differently than everyone else I know that comes to visit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you just sent me a challenge unknowingly. Thanks.
Yay. Sweet. You didn't know you were going to get homework from this recording, but here we are.
I didn't, but here we are. So looking ahead, right? And that could be short-term, long-term. What's a story you most want to tell that you haven't told yet?
So I have spent a lot of time in Japan, and I think it is my favorite place to travel, which is such a millennial stereotype. But I just really love exploring all the different unover touristed areas of that country. But in my most recent trip, I weirdly ended up in a lot of local theme parks, and
what?
I really would love to do like a small zine on Japanese theme parks, because it's such a like dilution of certain aspects of Japanese culture that I think people love and are fascinated by. And whether that's like the sort of like cutesy side of Japanese culture, where there's like obviously a lot of places that are like focused on a single animal, you know, like you've obviously probably heard of like a bunny island or a cat island or this sort of thing. But then there's also like islands that are really quirky and weird. Like here's a theme park that's basically dedicated to onions, and it's
What?
like an onion theme park. And there's like crane game machines where you just get an onion, and it's like I started making a list of these, and I was like, it would be very Martin Parr, quirky tourism travel approach, but I just think there could be a really, really fun story diving into like all the probably hundreds of Japanese theme parks that exist. So
I think that's hysterical. Like, yeah, never heard of the onion theme park, I would say. You know,
look it up.
Gilroy's got its garlic. But yeah, I think that kind of that could take the cake. I mean, for those that are in Gilroy, that's the garlic, or Castroville is the artichoke capital of California, and they've got all kinds of artichoke-y things. But yeah, onions, and especially in a claw game where you get an onion, like that's just
genius.
It just it makes me crack up. I'm like, is it red? Is it yellow? Is it white? I want to know what type of onion is it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all right.
Look out for that,
so now
hopefully.
we know what's coming. We know what's coming. Michael, this has been really, really fun, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And I know you have hundreds, if not thousands, more stories that we could dig into. So we'll have to bring you back and talk more like creative, exciting things in the future. For those that want to follow along, where is the best place to send them?
The best place is just at Michael George on Instagram. It's really the main social media I keep up with. I have like TikTok and those other things, but like, you know, I don't really keep up with them. So if you really want to find me, just hit me up on Instagram, and it's easy. It's just my name.
I love it. And do not be confused. It is Michael George.
Yes, not
the
George
singer.
Michael.
Not the singer.
Yes, I'm a singer. I'm going to karaoke tonight, but you know, we're not the same.
It's like you're like, that's my alter ego.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been really, really, I'm very humbled. I'm so excited that you made the time to do this. I know you're a busy guy, and I wish you all the best in your adventures in New York and finding the best burger place that is still open. So that way, when I come to visit, which hopefully won't be too far in the future from now, we can grab a burger and a bite together and swap more stories. Wow, that's a tongue twister.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for having me. I love that we go from walking to the Adobe offices to here. It's really been a delightful journey.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you post on Instagram next. Know that I am always watching. I kind of live vicariously through your things when you're like, oh, I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be here. And I was like, oh, I got to pay attention. Like, where is he? Where is he at? Oh, he's over here now, and he's over here now. So, yeah. Like, I don't even care if it's your own backyard. Keep posting. It's very inspiring. And I love seeing what you're up to.
Thank you.
I need to put the fire out for now, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. Come hang out with us on Instagram at creativecamp.pro. Drop your questions, share your thoughts, and tag us in your stories. The more people we gather around the fire, the better the conversation gets. If you'd like to support the show, you can buy us a coffee and sign up for our newsletter. Links are in the show notes below. We'll stoke the fire again real soon, but until then, keep creating, keep connecting, and I'll see you next time around the campfire.